Millions of frontline workers keep our economy running and are provided with the latest technology to do their jobs. But digital adoption, especially by frontline workers, is really hard.
This is Frontline Innovators. We explore how to overcome challenges and achieve success when we empower our essential workers.
I'm Justin Lake.
And I'm Gene Signorini. Together, we speak with experts who are leading the way and driving digital transformation to the front line.
This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, on a mission to help frontline workers learn and use the technology needed to succeed in their jobs. Today's guest is an accomplished professional with a master's degree in organizational leadership. She's been a field service specialist and a chief construction inspector, and is now the change management specialist at a major utility company where she's been for more than 14 years. Welcome, Blanca Nieto. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation today. So thank you so much for joining. I want to start like we often do on the show and ask you what you think is the biggest challenge you see facing the deskless frontline workers of today.
Yeah, right. I mean, who would have thought, right? We was tackled with this challenge, which I saw as an opportunity, right? I look at challenges as opportunities. And I feel that it is a challenge for many of us. We were used to being in an office, collaborating. If I had a question, I can just walk up and go to someone's desk. And now I have to call, right? I have to chat. There's just, we have a lot of avenues, right, where we can communicate with each other. But I feel that that contact, that emotional intelligence, right, to know if someone is having a bad day or not. You have to now you have to make an extra effort to ask, like, how is your day going? How are you doing? Where before you can kind of tell and you can, use your emotional intelligence there. Now you don't know what's going on, right? And so a lot of challenges with that. I think that another challenge is that, you're not used to this. We grow in a community. We don't grow in isolation, right? So I believe that, this challenge is going to be here for a while. But you just have to find different resources, different ways to communicate, to tap into people. I just think that as this continues to evolve, we continue to evolve as human beings. But at the end of the day, we're still humans. We need that contact, right? So yeah, a lot of challenges.
You work in an organization that has thousands of workers that don't work inside offices before or after COVID. Do you think that the experience has been different for the men and women that work in the field operations?
Absolutely. I think that not only, with the experience of not having people to go to, but you also have a lot of challenges with the new systems that are coming out, right? That we kind of had to learn immediately, right? There was no transition process. It's like, this is what we have. This is how we're going to communicate. I think that for some people who are in the field, they pretty much work in silo, right? They were used to that.
Right.
But you still got together with people, if it was someone's birthday, you came into the office, and you share those experiences. And I believe that those experiences is what builds a community. Those laughs, those little jokes, sometimes you can bring in your child. I know that, there were many instances for Christmas that will have, Santa Claus, and everyone will bring their children. Those experiences are very important. So even though they probably were used to working in silo, we're still missing that. We're still missing that to build a community and build a strong network, right? And so that's important.
When you started that, you talked about the number of new systems that everybody needed to learn. So this period of COVID over the last 18 months has been really the fastest acceleration of digital transformation in a lot of industries and segments within those industries. So I'd be curious to hear the men and women that you've worked with. what are some of the challenges that they've faced in trying to learn that new technology? Because I think, what we're seeing elsewhere is that not only did they have to learn it on a lot of new things, but they had to do it in an environment that was also very new to them, very new to all of us at that time. What do you think some of the challenges would be that they would say in terms of having to learn new technology under these circumstances?
Yeah, I think, not only you are learning one system, but you're also learning other systems. So before it was like, okay, you learn one thing and then you kind of get adapt to it. But we're being bombarded with so much technology all at once. And I think that it's draining. Right? You're just constantly learning one thing after another. You really don't get to understand, one system that might come out because another one came out and it's for a different function. But just the technology is just so rapid. And it's really hard to keep up with just everything coming out at once. And I think that that's one of what I've heard is that we're just having so many systems coming out at the same time. And, you're expected to kind of know this right away. You look at, for example, Teams, right? And it keeps evolving. Right. It's just not here is a system. Right. It just keeps evolving. There's new functions and you have to keep up with that. And, so it's very difficult, I find. And if you're not in that frame of mind where, you're taking these as an opportunity, it can become exhausting. Just exhausting everywhere around.
And in regards to your role as a change management specialist, what keeps you up at night in regards to how you can support the users that you're responsible for inside your organization?
They keep me up at night. I'm answering emails, I'm answering phone calls. So I think for me, it's very important because I was there. I still am in many ways. When there is no support, morale goes down. When there's no support, you don't want to go to work. It's just so difficult. But I feel that for me, I want to make them understand that I am there as their support. I might not know everything, but I will get you the answer. Right. And I think that goes a long way. We don't know everything. I'm just one person, but I feel that if you do have a network of people that are there to support you, it just makes it easier. It's just like when you're in the field and, you all are hustling to do something together. It just makes it easier. The process is more bearable, not easier, but bearable. And I think that that's important, just having that network.
You've mentioned network. I mean, we've just been on for a few minutes now, and you've already mentioned network a lot. So I can tell that that's something that's really important to you and something you believe strongly in. Tell me in your role how you can help facilitate, create that network amongst the workers that you're responsible to support.
So you always want to bring people with passion, right? You want to bring people in with passion about whatever it is that you're doing. And, that obviously is with awareness. You bring awareness of what are you doing? And then you kind of find people who are just passionate about something new. Those people you want to grab onto and you want to kind of, let them know that we need that passion. We need to ignite that same passion to other people who might not, might feel a little bit nervous or, change, it's inevitable. However, it's not easy. And so, you want to make sure that you bring all those people on board. And then there are kind of like, your arms and legs to reach out to other people, because you have to understand that, we're living in difficult times. And what we've known is that with the isolation, it affected a lot of people. We understand that, the community, having that network is so important for you to continue personally or at work. And I think that that's very important to have those people around you who share the same passion and can bring that passion to others.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think when you talk about the passion of both the people that you're working with, I can also tell just from the conversation that we had before the podcast, just the passion that you bring to your role. I'd love for you to share with our guests a little bit more detail just about what your role is and what you do day in and day out and how you interact with the folks inside your organization.
Yeah. So, my role is really, like I mentioned before, it's bringing awareness to a change, right? And once you bring awareness to a change, right, there's so many things that go into that. You always have to understand that you don't make assumptions, right? For you, one thing might be easy. For me, it might be hard, right? So we can't make assumptions. We always have to ask questions. We have to, give surveys out. And so, my role is really creating that awareness and then help facilitate that change, that process, bringing you along the process as well, giving you information, bringing that support team. And then after everything is all said and done, not just walking away, but also being there for you. And so, and I say you because it's on an individual basis.
Right.
Right. I look at everyone as a different person, as a unique person. And once you understand that, even if things don't go the right way, because, we're talking about technology here, they'll be able to understand that, listen, things happen. When iPhone comes out, right? The first iPhone that comes out always has bugs on them, right? There's always a bug. There's always, but we understand that now. And so just making it bearable for them. I think that for me is very important to let them know, listen, we're going to get this through. We're going to get it together. We're going to walk together in this fight.
It's interesting when we think about technology implementations, we're often thinking about very large groups of people that are going to be adopting the technology. But you just made a really good point that even though it's a large group of people, the change needs to happen on a more individual basis. How in the world do you look at a workforce that's got hundreds or thousands of people in it and look at them as a bunch of individuals, which is what they are, and cater to all of the different levels of adoption of that technology? Do you have any advice for how you might go about doing that to cater to that many different levels of understanding? As you said, what may seem easy to me may not seem easy to the person next to me. How do you account for all of that in your change management strategy?
Oh, I talk to a lot of people and I listen, right? I always try to listen intently, because I know that their time is very valuable, and I understand that this is not an easy process for anyone. For me, I think that just making sure that I am understanding of, and then that also teaches me, right, that not everyone is the same. So I always ask questions, like I said before. If I'm unsure of something, I always try to make sure that, what is it that you need in order for me to help you, right? What would make this process easier? So it's just constantly have that conversation. I have different conversations with many people. I pick up the phone and I call people and I ask them questions, right? That helps me understand that what I think might be something easy, like you mentioned before, it might be hard for other reasons, right? So I always try not to make assumptions or generalize. We're all different. We all learn differently. And we're all going through a different struggle. My challenges are probably not going to be your challenge. But always keeping that in mind, always listening to people, being open, and being honest. You always got to make sure that you let them know, this might not be something that you will get the first try, but, we're here to support you.
How do you identify the people in the organization that need your additional support? So I love the personal outreach aspect of what you've talked about. How do you know who needs the additional help versus somebody who is maybe doing better with the change?
Well, I think there's metrics that are in place to help you with that. If you put those metrics in place, then you'll see if someone is not adopting to the change that helps out. But I can say that for me, my experience in taking up psychology and having a lot of experience with customer service, you understand that sometimes there's an underlying issue. And so you always want to, like I mentioned before, try to ask questions and see if they're understanding what you're teaching them or the purpose, right, of why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that because of that, a lot of people gravitate towards me. I can have a conversation with anyone. And so I don't think people have any issues with coming to me and telling me, hey, I don't understand this, because I'm very open and I make people feel safe. Right. We talk about psychological safety. And that's one of the things that I always keep in mind. I want people to come to me and not feel that they might be condescending towards them because they don't know something, right? So I think it has to do with the individual. And sometimes, you draw it out of them. There's a lot that you can do as an individual, not just as a change management practitioner, but also, just a coworker. Are you understanding this? Like, can I help you with something? And just having those conversations, I think that is very key to getting people to talk and to let their guard down, because it's difficult, right?
Yeah, no, it is very difficult. And I think what I love about your approach is the outreach and being hands-on and making sure that you really have your finger on the pulse of what's going on with the men and women that you're supporting. I'm curious if you found ways to be able to scale that. You probably can't be there for everyone all the time, working 24/7, 365. Have you found ways that you can kind of categorize the challenges that some of the folks are potentially experiencing and look for ways to deal with them at scale? Or do you find that your best approach is still just very much one-on-one?
Yes, you're right. I'm only one person, but I think that when you bring people on board on your team, you have to bring that awareness to them. So as I mentioned before, the network is very important, finding those people that are also passionate, just like you are. And then those people, then you become duplicates of you, right? And your thoughts and how, what right? To be able to help everyone else. And I think that, we downplay sometimes our neighbors that are sitting next to us. We want to reach out to someone probably above us, right? But the people next to us are the people that know the best, right? And so if you equip people with information, with resource on where they can go, one of the things that we are using now with technology is QR codes. Right. So if you don't know something, you can just scan your QR code. A page comes up with a lot of resources. So, using technology as well to be there as a resource, sending out messages, keeping people in the loop. I think that also helps out because they feel like, okay, this is something that I should know. And I think that it helps just broaden that message when you're just one person.
Yeah, the use of QR codes is a fantastic example. In fact, I was going to ask you the next question, which is, how are you using technology to solve some of these challenges? So I think the QR codes are a great example of that. How well has that been received? Are you seeing use of some of those tech implementations, or is it still too early to tell?
No, absolutely. I've seen them. I mean, even with people in the field, that they're able to, scan a QR code with their phone on a bulletin that they see. I think it's very easy. It's not complicated. And you just pull out your phone, you scan it, and all the information is there. It is very well received from what I see as well. And now we're also understanding that I don't know what people's attention span was back then, but I know for sure it is shorter now.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely not getting any longer for sure.
Yeah. So doing little snippets of, videos, right? Like 1 or 2, 3-second videos to be able to teach something is very useful. we look at YouTube. You can do anything now with YouTube. I know that I recently did my daughter's bedroom. I've never laid carpet down. I watched the video. I kind of messed up a little bit, so I had to watch another video on how to fix it, and I fixed it. It came out beautiful. Took pictures. No one would ever know, right? But we understand that we have this technology, and although sometimes it can become frustrating, we can have a lot of use from that. And using these new technologies that are coming out, like the QR code, which I love. You could do a presentation and have a QR code there. They snap a picture and boom, there's whatever information you want to give them. Yeah, so I think it's important.
YouTube is a great example. It's as I understand it, it's the second most popular search engine behind only Google, which is their parent company. And it just shows you how, even outside of our work context, that when we need to do something, whether it's carpet or I have a bunch of hobbies and I'm always on YouTube looking up how to do things from other folks that have done it before, it's a very natural way for us to go learn. And it's been a little bit slower to get adoption in large organizations, particularly with frontline workers. So I'm very excited to hear that you're pulling some of that stuff in. And what I love in particular is that you've solved one of the user interface issues, right? Instead of having to go somewhere and go search for it and go struggle with trying to find the content that you're looking for, having the QR codes there at the point in time when and where they need it is really an exceptional way to give them the information that they need. So that's a fantastic example.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm dying for our audience. I'm actually going a little bit out of order here. We usually don't talk about our guest background until a little bit later in the conversation, but there are so many, I think, interesting gems in your background that I want to kind of bring out here. So if it's okay, I'd really love for you to talk about first of all, both your schooling, which I found very interesting to learn the degrees that you have that have really positioned you well for the role that you're doing. But I'd also love for you to give us some background on, how you kind of came to work inside this utility organization and how you've risen through the ranks and changed your responsibilities. So I think you actually started first as an employee before you went back for your degrees, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Why don't you start then with maybe your work history and kind of weave in when you went back to school to get the advanced degrees and things like that?
Absolutely. So yeah, I started at my company as a customer service rep. I did that for about 4 years. And I love learning new things. I just put myself in these positions that I really know nothing about, and I just go ahead and I said, you know what, I would like to learn that. And so, although I was inside in an office, I took a leap and I put in for a position to be a supervisor in the field. Very brand new. It was the first time I ever supervised. I mean, I had children, but it's nothing like supervising people who are not your family.
Right. They may have even been older than you, unlike your children.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, that was another challenge, right? I'm really young at the time. And so, I learned so much. I learned a lot about myself. At that particular time, I was new to, like I mentioned before, supervising and making sure that people were working, coaching people. So those were all new things to me, but I loved what I did. I love interacting with my employees every day. Just laughing sometimes when they would come back from their routes and just tell me, how their day went. Because as you know, I don't know if you ever worked in the field, it's very interesting. Every day there's something new, something happened. And I understand why people love being in the field. And so I did that for many years. I went back into the office. And, I could continue to supervise, sort of like in a different role, just worked on projects. And then I decided I want something new. I want to learn something else. And I went into construction. And that was an amazing experience. working with construction, hearing the jackhammering, and really having compassion for the hard labor. Right. That was very, it was touching to me because, you have these employees out there, doing all this type of hard labor in adverse, weather conditions. And so I loved it. And now, I'm in a position where sort of like the liaison between the end user and these new systems coming out.
So first of all, I have to address something that you just said because it's been driving me crazy in all that we've been talking about with the pandemic. And we talk about things like Zoom fatigue and people complaining about, all the video conferencing that we've had to do these days. The men and women that you just talked about, the folks that are working in construction, the folks that are doing the field service jobs out in the field, they don't have Zoom fatigue. They actually have real fatigue. They're tired because they have a real job that's physical and they're working out in the field. And not to suggest that those of us that work in offices don't have real jobs, but I've just found it comical that people are laughing, or not laughing, but complaining rather about, Zoom fatigue and the stresses of, video conferencing all day. And I'm like, the men and women out in the field, they would love to have a day where they just had to sit on a video conference in an air conditioned, living room. Right. So to hear you talk about the men and women in the field, that is just near and dear to my heart. I have such tremendous respect for them. And I think the experience that they've had through this pandemic has been very different than those of us that have the good fortune of working from home or a relatively comfortable office in most cases. And, I really feel for them in that they've kind of had to stick it out. They've still had to work in the elements. They've still had to do the same job they had to do before, and really didn't get a lot more creature comforts in order to do that job. So it was a great part of the story. So what I find very interesting about your background is that you were in the field working as a field service supervisor, and then in the construction side. And then you also have a degree that is very different from what most people with that background would have. Tell us about your university experience and how that came about.
Yeah, so I started off working as a dental assistant when I was pretty young. I had mentioned to you before the podcast that at that time, I really didn't know what to do, right? I was just kind of lost. Technology was coming out. I had my first gateway computer, trying to figure it out. So I said, maybe this is a field that I can go into. But I got the opportunity to work for a dental office. And that is where my passion sparked. It was something that I learned. I was very good at it. And I said, this is something that I want to pursue. And then I, became a dental assistant. And then I went into wanting to become a dental hygienist. So I got into the program. I loved what I did, but unfortunately I was not able to finish. And so I applied for, my company now. And, then I said, I want to go back to school. Because I wanted to show my children that, you can do it all. I really wanted to prove to them that although at the time, I was a single mom, I had them really young, that my life didn't stop, that they did not stop my life. And that was one of the reasons. And then the second reason was I have a passion, to be around people. And I'm always intrigued on human behavior. Right. And so I said, I probably want to go back, didn't really know what to do. And then the opportunity came about to do psychology, and I loved it. So I went to my university, and I graduated with my bachelor's in psychology. And then I wanted to get my master's. I said, why not get my master's? And I said, I could go into psychology before my line of business. I thought it would be probably best to do something with business. And so organizational management has psychology in it. And so I thought that was the great field to become an expert in. And so I went to Manhattan College to become organizational management, have a degree in that. And so I don't stop learning. If I can go back, I would. I think it's a little expensive for me to go back, but I am always constantly learning, just learning new things. Obviously, with COVID now, you're not able to go in person to a lot of places, because I also enjoy that. I also enjoy going in and meeting new people, learning their thought process, having conversations. I love all of that. And so, now I think that with COVID, I probably will go back, but just to do like little certificates here and there.
Right. So you came from field service, construction, customer service, then you got degrees in psychology and organizational leadership. Is that what ultimately led you to want to be in a role where change management is really a key part of your role every day?
I think it was the perfect role. I believe that my trajectory of jobs and positions, it just led me to this perfect place where I feel comfortable, where I enjoy. It was just perfect how everything lined up. None of it was planned. Obviously, yeah. I had another plan, but I love the fact that I work for a company that gives me that opportunity. Right. And so I take those opportunities. I'm very grateful for them. But I landed in a place where I am comfortable, where I understand, and I continue to learn, right? Because change happens all the time, but it happens in a different way, right? We never expected to work from home the way that we did. And we had to adapt to that. So I think I'm in a perfect role now.
That's awesome. So I want to shift back. I'm really glad you shared that part of your background, because I find it totally fascinating, just the diversity of the experiences and the education that you have. I think it's just made for such an interesting role for you to have inside your organization. So I want to shift back a little bit to kind of the innovation conversation, and just the challenges and the opportunities associated with that. I'm curious where you see the push for innovation coming from inside the organization that you work at. Do you see that coming from just senior level leadership? Do you see it coming from the field? Are the men and women in the field asking for that innovation? Where do you see the push for that to come from? And where are some of the biggest change issues for you, the challenges that you have to overcome as an agent of change inside your organization?
Well, I think that it's going to come from different places, but primarily it's going to come from the customer, right? At the end of the day, this is who we serve. And the customers are constantly comparing companies, right? I get a text when my package is dropped off in front of my lawn with a picture, right? And so we're constantly comparing companies, and I believe that it's our duty, right, to serve our customers. So I believe that the change is going to come from our customers. However, as a company, we need to be ahead of them, right? And not just wait for them to say, this is the need. We have to understand the future for them, right? So we constantly have to be innovative, bring people in who understand other industries, right? To bring ideas. And then ultimately, yes, our leadership is going to make those decisions on which projects they're going to invest in. And then obviously, the lower level will have to adopt to that. And internally, because they're also customers as well, right? You will also see a little bit of that internally. But I think that primarily, it is the customer who's going to push you to the next level and continue to push you to that next level.
Companies like Amazon, I think, may have been the company you were referring to with the photos. They've really reset the bar for customer experience. And I do think that that's driving a lot of transformation in what I would say are kind of legacy industries like utilities and other similar ones where the the expectations for the consumers have just changed so dramatically because of what's now been shown to be possible, right?
Right.
And so all of those efforts around digital transformation, I hesitate to use that word, but I use it just to kind of fall in line with, because so many other people use that expression. It feels a little overused sometimes, but it actually leads me to the question about, what do you think your frontline workers in your organization think when they hear about digital transformation initiatives? Do you think they're rolling their eyes? Do you think they're excited about it? What do you think their take is on all of this change that's coming down from an innovation standpoint?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, we're kind of, bombarded with so much change when it comes to technology. I don't hear a lot of people being excited, when a new application rolls out. But I do think that this is going to be here for a long time, right? I think that we're going to get to a point where we're going to understand that something new is going to come out. And so, yeah, there is challenges, all the time, because, change is sometimes scary. You get used to doing something a certain way, and then it changes, and there's a process, a transition process. But I think that we have to remain flexible. And I'll give you a perfect example. I set up my daughter to take coding on Saturdays, coding classes, and it was going to be in person. And I was very excited about that. I said, yes, finally something that she can do, and she can be around other children. And I got a call yesterday, and they said, sorry, we're going to have to make this virtual. And so I said, for me, okay, it's virtual. I really wanted something in person, but breaking that to her, it was difficult, because she's like, I don't want to do something else online. Right. And I told her, I said, well, look at the bright side. We don't have to travel 30 minutes to get there. Right. You can be on your pajamas on Saturday. Right. And then you can take your class. And so I think that as time passes and the more we get used to this, I think that it'll become easier. We're probably going to accept it a little bit more. But I don't think it's going to change. I think that we're going to continue, and it's going to be rapid. We have to keep up. But like I mentioned before, having those resources, having a network, I think about my mom and how, it's very difficult for her to navigate sometimes through technology. But she has me to kind of help her through that. And just, that piece, that moment where she's frustrated and I come to her rescue. I said, Mom, you just this is what you do. We'll figure this out. And sometimes I don't even know, when it comes to technology, right? I have to go to my children now and ask them for help. But I think that having that network, having people around you who can help you, there's just so much resources out there. But I think that we have to remain flexible, because it's not going away. It's going to be more, and it's going to be rapid, like we're seeing now.
The pace is definitely not slowing down. And you just made a point that I want to circle back to, because I think it's really important. I think there was a time in the evolution of technology when our team members thought if they just resisted using it, that they could go back to the paper-based process for some period of time. They were comfortable with that. They didn't want it to innovate, and they were comfortable with that. I think now what I've seen with the frontline workers that I interact with, they still may not like it. They may not like the pace of change. They may still be nervous, and some of the other emotions that I'd still like to talk about a little bit here too. But one thing that does seem to be changing is their acceptance that this is going to happen whether I embrace it or not. Right. And I don't want anybody to feel that they're forced into it, right? But I do feel that they've kind of acquiesced a little bit and just said, okay, we're going to have to figure this thing out. It's a tool. I actually had an employee once tell me, I understand it's a tool. I don't have to like it. I understand it's a tool and it's a necessary part of my job. And so I'm going to figure this out. And I kind of captured that quote in my head, because I said, I think that represents the way a lot of workers feel about what's happening now. Now, I think the next thing is to say, well, how do we deal with some of the other emotional and psychological issues of this digital transformation. And that's the part I was so excited to meet you and talk to you about it with your background in psychology and sitting as a change management specialist now. Do you feel that users are as anxious and feel as vulnerable about the tech change? They may accept and know that they have to change, but do you think that there's some anxiety? You described the situation with your mother, that she seems very nervous about having to use the technology. Do you think the same thing's happening in our workforce?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, technology sometimes can be intimidating, right? If you were not kind of raised with technology around you, it takes a long time to kind of adapt. I was mentioning before, technology, when you talk about apps and there's probably more than one way to get to a place, right? It's just like math, right? There's a couple of ways to get you to the answer. But if you don't even have that base, right? You wouldn't even know where to go. So I think it's very intimidating for a lot of people. The anxiety is high because you don't really have time to absorb what you're learning, to kind of go through it. It takes a lot of time to figure something out when you're in front of a computer. And so the clock is ticking. You've been here for an hour already trying to figure this out. Frustration comes out. And then it might be someone, probably it took them a little less time. And then you see that and you feel a certain way, right? You feel like, man, why didn't I figure that out? It took me an hour to figure this out. And so I think that a lot of people, we were mentioning this before, when you're going into a virtual either learning or in person, you see that some people don't even want to ask questions, and that's been with every your whole life, right? You don't want to ask that stupid question that you think is stupid, but it's very intimidating. And I think that you come to a point in your life that your brain is also slowing down. You're not as quick, as when you were younger, to understand things, right? So that's another thing, and that you have to also be aware of. Right now, I don't know what the statistics are, but we do know that the baby boomers are exiting, right? But we still have to remember that we're all going to go through the same process, right? We're all going to get there. We're not going to be young forever. And technology is always going to be in this fast pace. So that challenge is always going to be there. But like I mentioned before, making sure that you have people around you that can help you out whenever you get stuck is, I think, to me, is very crucial.
I think even if some workers coming into the workforce today might adopt technology maybe a little bit quicker, is something that you just said, I think, is important, and it will never go away. And that is that there will always be diversity in the level of adoption, the level of discomfort with that change. So it doesn't matter whether you're bringing on 1,000 people that are 25 or 1,000 people that are 50 into an organization, or bringing it into new technology. Even within that population of users, there's going to be diversity in their comfort level with that adoption. And we really need to be, continuously looking at how we can kind of meet them where they are and their level of understanding, and make sure that we can support them. And you talked about that at the absolute most individual level, down to the one-on-one. And then I'm looking at that as saying, okay, how do we apply a very individualized approach, but to do it at scale if we've got hundreds or thousands of people across the organization? And I don't think that's easy. Something else that you said, and I'm curious about, your ideas on this, is not just about training people on how to use the technology, but you've mentioned the word support a lot today. And I think you may mean that in a few different ways. I think you might mean support as just being a shoulder to lean on sometimes. I sense that in your personality, but are there other ways do you think it helps to help users understand where they get support if something goes wrong? Does that give them comfort? And what are some of the suggestions that you would have for others, and how they might want to communicate the availability of that support to the users?
Yeah, so using technology, right? Like I mentioned before, when you talk about people who are in the field, they are necessarily not in front of a computer. So that's challenging, right? How do you get to these people that probably just have a phone with them?
Right.
And so I think bringing awareness, having those conversations in groups, having sort of like those groups that they can come together and you can say, listen, if you need help, here is a guide. Right, making cheat sheets. I remember, when I was in the field, I had hundreds of those for everything, right? Because you don't have time to go through books, right? But you have to understand what the need is. That's like primarily, right? I always mention the assumption, right? Not making assumptions. So you do have to understand, and by doing that, you have to go out there and you have to speak to people, right? What is the need here? And how can you facilitate that better? How can we use technology? Also talking to other utility companies or other companies that are probably benchmarking. What are they doing? Because sometimes they might not even know how you can help them. So you have to really have those conversations. Is so key to have conversations with people. And once you're open to that, they are open to speak to talk to you about everything. What are their challenges? I remember there was a study that I did within my company. And it was really just to get from start to finish, what they did throughout the day. I remember them being a little resistant, right? Because here's someone next to you watching your every move. But once they were comfortable with me, there were so many challenges that they faced, right? And we didn't know that. We did not know that. And we would never have known that if we did not have those conversations. I could have sent them a survey. I could have, possibly say here's a box, drop in your suggestion. But I think that having those conversations with people, they open up to you and they tell you what their challenges are. And then after that, not just hear it and just write it down, but then take action and let them know that you're taking action. Right. And that's where the work really starts for a change management person. It's really there.
Yeah, I love that. We always say you can't build solutions from a conference room when you're talking about workers in the field, right? You have to get out there and see the environment that they work in, see the tools that they're using, the vehicles that they're driving, the circumstances, and the environment's not just the physical, or the weather and things like that, but also, are they working inside someone's house? Are they working inside a factory? Are they working inside other machinery? And it's just such a really important part to understand a day in their life. And to your point, to actually ask them what they need is such an obvious and simple thing that is often overlooked by large companies when they're looking to innovate and try to solve challenges in the field. So I love that you've taken the time to go out and do that. I think that's great. We've talked a lot about kind of the past and we've brought it up to the current state. What do you see in the future? What do you see your role? How do you see that evolving? What excites you most about the future of your role inside your organization?
Learning more about people excites me. Every process that I'm going through, I'm learning from that. And I'm taking those experiences and saying, in the future, I can do this way. So for me is learning, adopting what I'm learning from people, how the process worked and what didn't work. So applying that to the future, to other rollouts, it excites me because I feel that this is just going to be one of many changes for my company. And so, being able to be an expert, right, at the changes and the strategies, and having people say, it's not the best, but we did have someone there as a support to guide us. and building that trust with the employees, I think is so important. Because, just like customers, you can give them a +1 customer experience. And then the next day you do something and that went down, right? Something that you didn't meet their expectation. Then you went down to a negative, right? So we have to constantly evolve. For me, I'm very passionate about what I do. And I want to see when this is finished, this particular role, how people are adapting, right? And how are they just behaving, right? Did I do a good job? Am I doing a good job? I think that, with innovation and technology, it's always going to be here, right? But always maintaining flexibility in, what you do, how you do it, and be ready for that change.
You just talked about flexibility. I think that's an amazing point, particularly in older organizations that have been around for a long time. If there are definitely some good things that have come from the pandemic. I think we've learned a lot about ourselves. And the truth is we have actually adapted pretty significantly. I think actually, and this is probably shows up more in older companies and maybe some of the newer companies that were kind of innovated at their inception. But what we've shown some of the older companies, or what this experience has shown, is that we actually can be flexible, we can be nimble, we can adapt. The people that are involved in this can absorb some of that change. So we did things kind of under duress during this experience. We certainly didn't plan for COVID, but it really has taught us that even organizations that maybe didn't feel very flexible or adaptable, when forced to do so, they were able to do it.
Right.
And I really hope as we come out of the backside of this, companies have been able to kind of modify their culture to an extent where they can now be more accepting and open to that change. And people like you can really lead that charge inside their organizations.
Absolutely.
So if you could go back, we need to kind of wrap it up. As I knew was going to happen, we were going to blow through the time that we had together. But I am very curious to see, you've had such a diverse set of experiences, and you strike me as somebody who primarily looks forward, not backward. But I am curious to see if you could go back and do anything differently. Would you change the course? Would you change the classes that you took? Would you change the roles and responsibilities that you had throughout your career?
No. And as I look back, there were some of the things that I wanted to do, as I was going through school, and I look back and I say, I'm grateful that I did not get that job. I am grateful that those doors were not open, because I wouldn't be here today, where I feel comfortable. I feel very passionate. I would not change anything. We were talking before, and I explained to you that, I lived in many places. I lived in Florida, Miami, Orlando. I lived in Puerto Rico. I lived in, I lived in many places. I went to school many places. But those experiences is what got me here today. I needed those experiences. I'm an only child. So I gravitate to others, because there's really no one else. And so people have helped me open up doors. I always, growing up, I would always hear, people say, man, you have potential. And I never understood that. I never understood why people would tell me that. And, just giving me, just reinforcing that, don't worry, right? You're going to figure this out. And so I think that I would not change not one course, not one degree. I was passionate about becoming a dental hygienist. For a long time, I had my courses printed out, and I would check them off as I, was completing each course for the degree. And it stopped, right? Because I couldn't do it anymore. And I remember having to take that piece of paper down But I took it down very proudly because I said, I learned a lot, and still to this day, I'm friends with a lot of my classmates. But I made so much experience and networking with more people in my company that have become family. So I would not change anything. And I think that, for me, as far as learning, I won't stop here. Who knows in the future where else I would be. But for right now, I think I'm in the perfect place. And those experiences is what got me here.
That's fantastic. One thing that's starting to shape up as a common theme on the Frontline Innovators podcast is that a lot of our guests are in roles today where they are supporting colleagues in roles that they used to have. So in your example here, you talked about your experience in field service and your experience on the construction teams and things like that. And now you're in a position where you provide support for some of those folks. I think that's so fantastic. It's genuine empathy. You can literally put yourself in their shoes because you have been there. You've done those jobs and you know what it's like working in the elements and working under the stress that they're working under today. And so I can just tell that comes out in how you describe your role today and the compassion and passion that you bring to your role. And it's really exciting to have had you tell us your story today. So I really appreciate you spending the time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I do need to wrap it up there. And I hope that everybody else has found this conversation as enjoyable as I have. If so, please share and rate the podcast. 5-star ratings help ensure that it gets promoted to other professionals like you who are innovating on the front lines. This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, the mobile digital adoption platform for deskless and frontline workers. Visit the website at skillful.com. That's SKYLLFUL.com. And if you or someone you know is out there innovating on the front lines, we'd love to hear their story. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn and share your story, and we'll see you on our next episode.